by Riverside.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grassroots and Chill. My name is Yolanda Gordon, and I am the Senior Manager of the Fellowship Program and Advocacy at Results. Tonight is going to be a little different. I am going to be interviewing Tiffany Tagbo and Lindsay Saunders about their experience with SNAP. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program has been a vital program for families in the United States to provide nutrition assistance. They receive it because times are hard, money's tight, and wages have not caught up with inflation. Tonight, we're also going to talk about another vital program, WIC, Women's Infants and Children Supplemental Program, that is also facing some very stringent cuts in Congress's upcoming budget. I'm going to introduce our two guests. Actually, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Tiffany, I'll let you go first.
Hello, you guys have seen me before in the first podcast episode. A little bit more about me. I'm a mother, a student, and an advocate. I take all of my jobs seriously. I really love advocating. I really love going to school and trying to make life better, not only for myself, but for my children. And I believe advocacy is a big part of that. There is no way that I can think of anybody really just without being able to advocate, especially during difficult times like this where things are rapidly changing, laws are in a place working against citizens instead of working for them. And I'll hand it over to Lindsay.
Well, thank you, Tiffany and Yolanda, for having me join you. My name is Lindsay Saunders. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm located in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been a volunteer advocate with Results for almost 13 years, but I've been trying to use my voice as long as I can remember just to try to help. I just have this desire to help people. I started out my career as an elementary school teacher, and for the last several years, I've been leading marketing communications in nonprofits and government programs. I'm a mom of a preschooler, and I have some invisible disabilities and some other challenges that I deal with on a daily basis. I'm also, as a child and as a mother, I have been a WIC beneficiary.
I wanted to give some data. With HR 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill that was passed last year and was signed into law on July 4th, a young adult between the ages of 18 and 24 who aged out of foster care lost their automatic SNAP exemption. So no family safety net, piecing together gig work, now told to log 80 hours a month or lose food after 3 months. That was change number one. Change number two was the increase in age for adults without dependents, or what we call ABOD, able-bodied adults without dependents. That went from 54 up to 64. Most people who imagine that they will retire around 62 or 63, if they need SNAP benefits, they are required to either work 80 hours a month or do a qualifying activity for 80 hours a month. Gen Z and millennials carry the heaviest food insecurity burden of any adult generation. Purdue's tracking has consistently shown that Gen Z, at roughly double the millennial rate, about 32% versus 18% in their year-end generational breakdown. The Urban Institute found that 27.7% of adults ages 18 to 64 reported that they live in a household that's food insecure in 2025 versus 24.2% of all adults. So the insight really in organizing this this episode was to talk about Gen Z and millennials, and at the same time talk about how this law has changed for populations that used to be protected. Not only that, the attacks on women and children that continue to come at the hands of the waste, fraud, and abuse argument. First question I want to ask Tiffany. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with SNAP and, kind of paint the picture of going into the program and actually what it felt like going through that process?
I have been on SNAP before. I've had seasons where I've done really well, but then I had seasons where I haven't done well, and that is the result of being laid off or being furloughed. And speaking from personal experiences, I can say that it's very humiliating. I mean, because I have a college degree, right? And I went to college to try to mitigate some of these issues. I went to college so I would not have to depend on safety nets. And to find myself back in that position, it wasn't a good feeling. And so when we start talking about asking younger people to work and prove that they need to eat and to prove that they're hungry and to prove that they need SNAP, it's not a good thing at all. I mean, I've worked with young people who've aged out of foster care, and it's very difficult because we're talking about a population that may not have family as a safety net. Oftentimes they're by themselves trying to figure out the world. They're trying to figure out how they're going to afford housing, how they're going to get a job, how they're going to get a car to get to job, how they're going to get health care and all these other things. And some of them are trying to continue their education all at the same time. And so we are putting a heavy burden on young adults who have not had the experience that we've had. I mean, they've had trouble getting jobs, and especially in this economy, it's worse than it ever has been, at least that I've seen in my lifetime. So we're asking them to go work 80 hours, go volunteer for 80 hours, all while trying to figure the world out. It's not okay. I mean, and it just makes it much more difficult for them to become financially stable when they don't have these safety nets in place.
Right. And I think you make a good point about not having a safety net in place, because not only are we talking about individuals who age out of foster care, we also have to think about the fact they don't have a family unit to rely on. So they don't have the things that other people have when they are trying to figure life out at a very young age. And I do, you know, myself, I'm 46 years old. I remember being in my 20s with children and trying to navigate the system. I am a former SNAP recipient, and I do remember the humiliation. I do remember being judged just because I needed assistance and not being viewed as someone that was actually trying to provide for my kids. I totally get everything that you're saying. And the one thing that I want to ask you about is we have this mentality in the United States that if you have a degree, that you should be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Talk a little bit about that mentality and how it conflicts with the American dream that most people talk about.
I will say that is definitely the wrong mentality to have, especially when we start talking about populations and demographics that have historically been discriminated against. Whether we talk about being a woman and not having historically the right to have autonomy, to purchase property, to have a bank account. And then when we talk about, for me at least, being an African American and facing additional barriers like discrimination, and all those type of things, it ignores every single barrier that is put in place to keep people from being successful. I'll put it like that. And so having a college degree helps, but it doesn't protect you from all those things that I just named. It doesn't protect us from being looked at as less than because we are women. It doesn't protect us from being discriminated against, even though we have laws against it. I would say having a college degree helps, but again, it doesn't mitigate every single barrier that's in place. And that's something that I would like people to understand when we start talking about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, because how can you pull yourself up by bootstraps when you don't have any boots to begin with, when you're literally starting from a place that is not equal to where other people are starting from?
Lindsay, I pose the same question to you. What do you think about this mentality that education is everything and you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Just give me your perspective on um, the erosion of the American dream for millennials and Gen Z.
Well, that's a topic that it really strikes a nerve with me. It really frustrates me. I remember from the time I was a child in elementary school, my parents were talking to me about if I worked hard, then um, a college or university might essentially pay me to go to their school. They would want me so much, and I worked hard, and I was able to get some scholarships. Um, I also worked 2 jobs through undergrad, and my parents helped me, and I have loans. And then I'd say it was about a decade later, I had a second job, and I went back to school and got a master's degree. I funded the the graduate degree pursuit with loans, and then I was paying my living expenses with my day job and burning the candle at both ends because I was work and then literally right after work and every break just goes straight into my schoolwork. And um, now it's essentially like denial because these student loans are staring back at me and I can't afford to pay them. And people tell me that with my credentials, I should be making well over 6 figures, and I'm not. And with my experience, my credentials, and I'm not. And I'm like, what did I miss? What step here did I miss in the process? Because I thought I did everything that I was supposed to do to make it. And 10 years ago, I even learned about different types of mortgages. So I could buy a townhouse that was the same age as me. The townhouse and I are 43. And so I was like, all right, doing that, did something right. And, as they say, doing the things to move yourself forward to build wealth. And then you have a setback like a divorce or a medical emergency, and then another medical emergency that you literally cannot help. And you go right back into debt and relying on where I am is I have a full-time position as a leader with a nonprofit and trying to cover pre-K and a mortgage. And there's not enough left over for groceries. So I go to the food pantry every month and I'm trying to keep a list of those that I can access because it's now at this point, I make too much to qualify for WIC. It was the lifeline when I was pregnant and the first year when I was the breadwinner. No, I'm not the only one. But it's like I'm spinning my wheels because shouldn't I be further than this? Shouldn't everything be more stable? Like I said, isn't the playbook the one that I followed? And I know I also have the privilege of being a white woman, an English speaking first language educated white woman the patriarchy is always there, staring back at me, but I know that I have so many advantages, and um, it still feels like just spinning wheels. I really had hoped that it wouldn't be a cycle that's repeated, because I remember being a child and my parents saying, we don't have the money for that. And that was the refrain over and over again. We always had enough food, um, but everything else was secondhand, and that could get frustrating. You wanted the new stuff like your friends had. And now I'm finding creative ways to tell my child, okay, we're going to add that to the wish list, or that's going to be for in a few months when we get to this milestone or something. And um, marking the date when I go to the food pantry, and then when I can go again. And there is such an element of shame to that. And like, what did we do wrong? We didn't do anything wrong, especially if we pursued an education. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Um, but it's all we can do is keep going. There are some people who are working themselves to the bones, and they are still struggling. And so it's the tenacity. Yeah, I'll give it that. That part is accurate. You'll keep going and survive for that. But you can work yourself till you're bone dry. And in America, still essentially had nothing to show for it.
That is so true. I'm a Gen Xer, and I will say that for me, I feel that my generation and boomers really failed millennials and Gen Z, largely because um, I feel like boomers started pulling the ladder up after themselves, and Gen X did not grab the ladder to pull it back down when we had the opportunity. Um, so I feel like the American dream that is being sold is a pipe dream, and it's dead. It doesn't exist for folks of a certain age. You shouldn't be, dreaming of buying a house at 50 years old. Like that should not be the reality, and it is the reality for a lot of people. Um, the one thing that I want to ask, and welcome, Candace. I'm glad you were able to join us. Um, with the fiscal pressure that we all feel, because I can say I feel it too, and I'm with you. I have 2 degrees, and I keep being told with your degrees and your experience and your background, you should have XYZ 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, well, that may have worked back in the early 2000s, but in the 21st century, it doesn't look the same. So when thinking about the fiscal pressures that we're facing, when you go out to maybe go to the grocery store, or when you go out to maybe pick up those necessary things. Like the one thing that used to stress me when I was on SNAP was not having enough toilet paper and paper towels or laundry detergent. What is the first thing that comes off of your list, off of your table when money's tight? And I'll start with you, Lindsay.
I'm not sure, because I've discovered this mutual aid community called the Buy Nothing Project. And so, I mean, the tea that I'm drinking right now even was given to me. That's part of my morning and evening ritual thing. And so this was given to me. I go ask for it, and literally, honey, honey, like, I wouldn't buy honey, but I asked for honey, I think, over the weekend, and 2 people gave me honey. And so now I have honey to last me for quite a while. Um, Protein shakes, I'm on the go, and sometimes I really just don't have time to eat, or my son is really, really picky, and I get so anxious about, is he getting enough to eat? But also with long COVID fatigue, I might not have the energy to even sit there to have a full meal, to have protein shakes on hand. Um, I have some strawberry ones in my fridge right now that I got from the Buy Nothing group, and I don't really like that flavor, but I'm drinking them because they help me stay more energized. But I'm not buying them. Honey, I'm not gonna go buy honey for my tea.
Gotcha. Candace, do you want to tell me, with the fiscal stress that we are all feeling, um, what's the first thing that comes out of your cart or comes off of your list of things to purchase when you go to the grocery store?
So, hey everybody. So for me, I've been a mom for a long time, so like a long, long time, 20 some years. So being able to be in a place where I've utilized SNAP, TANF, WIC, and Medicaid, and not really knowing how to budget things, I have learned through experience of having my children how to budget. Even when I was getting SNAP benefits, I'm like, even though I'm getting these, I need to learn how to manage them because one day I'm not going to get them. So I learned how to make a grocery list and I will put what's important on there, the most essentials, milk, bread, oatmeal, eggs, things to make meals, especially rices, grains, things like that. So even today, with not being eligible to receive benefits, I still shop like that now. So I make a grocery list out. I see what I have to budget, my husband and I, and what bills we have to pay, depending on, car notes and things throughout the month. And we will, I still use those essentials. So the milk, the bread, the eggs, rices, frozen vegetables, those things are a must. I can make meals out of them. You can put some rice and, you know what I'm saying, vegetables together and make a meal. So it's just being mindful and being resourceful of what you have, you know what I'm saying, without making yourself feel lower and already worse than where you are. So that's how I've learned over time. And then also working at a food bank, we're able to utilize the pantry there. At first I wouldn't for a long time 'cause I'm like, no. But we all need food. So, you have to put that to the side and think about your family and it definitely helps. So that's how I look at it.
And
Thank you.
basically, Candace, what you just described with shopping in mind is called food math for our listeners. It is the ability to sit there and figure out how you can make things stretch. And you're right. Rice, um, spaghetti noodles, elbow noodles, um, potatoes, when you can get them, those things can stretch. When you're on SNAP, it is really hard to budget the dollars without doing food math. And, most people don't even know what that is, unless they've been in those positions. Food math is one of the things that I need our members of Congress to understand, that while you're shopping at Whole Paycheck, we're standing in the grocery store doing food math about how much meat can we buy to last us for 2 weeks. Very real reality. Tiffany, your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of what Candace described definitely goes. And outside of that is what I generally do to make dollars stretch. And instead of getting like maybe a larger bottle of laundry detergent, which would be more economical, I would either go for the smaller bottle, or this is where family comes in handy. I would call family and see if they have what I needed, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's all necessary. I can't sacrifice my kids having clean to go to school in versus, choosing to feed them over that. I mean, like you said, you have to do the math, you have to make it work. And so I want not only Congress, but people out here to understand that SNAP recipients are not in the grocery stores buying steak and lobster, which is a common misconception. they're doing the hardest things that they can do. They're telling their children, no, we can't get that right now. They're standing at the register having to put things back because maybe something didn't ring up on sale like it was supposed to, or maybe you slightly went over budget. You're having to sacrifice your pride and ask your family, can you help me with this month? Or you're having to figure out a way in between jobs to go to the food pantry. And I know for me, one of the things that I've done outside of, doing food math or buying smaller bottles of laundry or, maybe the cheap toilet paper is I've actually picked up like side jobs. Sometimes I'll go drive for Lyft because I know I can get paid the same day, and then I can maybe go get gas in my car, or I can go get that laundry soap that I wasn't able to afford when I went to the grocery store. I can maybe go pick up snacks for my kids that I couldn't have gotten before if I did not go drive. And so people are out here working. Again, earlier in the year, I was literally working 2 full-time jobs, more than 80 hours a week. And so I would have to sacrifice time with my family just to make sure that I could afford basic necessities and keep a roof over their head. And so I want people to know that we have to make difficult decisions, and there are difficult decisions that we don't want to make, and there are difficult decisions that we shouldn't have to make. And so you have to let go of this pull yourself up by the boots mentality. You literally cannot tell someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps while you remove the floor that they're standing on.
That is so true. With cutting SNAP, thinking about the cost shift to states, where states are going to have to pay a percentage of the administrative costs for SNAP, which then again is going to take money out of other areas of state safety net programs. Like, a lot of folks don't get the layered complexity, not only of what it's like to be a SNAP recipient, but also what it's like to have to make those tough decisions. I'm going to start with you, Candace. When you first heard about HR 1 and the potential cuts to SNAP and all of the changes, what were your first thoughts?
Of course, being boots on the ground with what I do, as a resource specialist, that assists neighbors with applying for those programs, it was very disheartening. It was a lot of questions that was being asked by, neighbors and people in the community, what they were gonna do. Some people yelling at me thinking, I can control that or what I can do. So it was overwhelming at first, what I'm saying, to even learn everything. And a lot of things like we didn't know, we learned from the community or from neighbors getting letters in the mail, and they were sharing them with us. So it was kind of like a learning experience, even together, navigating with educating those neighbors that we serve and help, as well as educate myself. But like, okay, we know that this is not anything new. We've been hearing it. How can we help them where they are? You know what I'm saying? To not fall apart and feel so stressed already on top of everything they got going on. Because we know not only does SNAP um, allow you to buy groceries and things like that. But then, you started seeing where you couldn't get certain foods on there. So even going to the stores when they put in place that you couldn't get certain items off of SNAP, that really rose a lot of anxiety as well for people because people are going to take quantity with calories over, trying to eat healthy. So that was a big thing as well. They're like, yeah, I know I need to eat healthy, but I only got a little bit. So I'll rather buy noodles and chips and things like that and soda for my family because we can get more of it and I can get more, for my bucks versus buying fruits and vegetables and things like that. And then especially when it came to choice foods that, they weren't able to get anymore. So it just already made people feel like I'm already getting SNAP and now you're trying to tell me what I can and cannot eat. So it was taking that dignity away from them. So it was very frustrating even to know that these things were put in place because it's like, who are you? Y'all haven't had to see a child go hungry or ask what they're going to eat at night. Um, they can eat whatever, you know what I'm saying? They can do whatever. They don't have to worry about this bill, how much you can spend, what you can and cannot get. And if they have, they're gonna bury it way deep to where they just are so far disconnected, you know what I'm saying, from that lifestyle if they had to live that so that they don't have to remember it. And I think that's the thing when people forget, rather if you are high up in the White House to those that have no house, if you're on Capitol Hill to those that is rolling down the hill, you should still have that dignity and rights that we all need to eat. We all need to be healthy no matter what stature you're in. And so that was very hard to deal with. But of course, when you have a little, you learn to navigate with what you have and you just make it happen. Sometimes you don't understand how, you can't even make sense of it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up empty calories or buying chips and processed foods with SNAP because it's not that people want to do those things. It's often an argument among people who don't understand that you have to make those really hard decisions. A lot of these decisions, of course, we know they are not made with science in mind. But I wanted to kind of, and I'm going to move on to WIC in just a second. I wanted to level some things for folks who need to really understand what this looks like. The total cut for SNAP is $187 billion through 2034. The CBO estimated that 2.4 million people would fall off of SNAP benefits per month. Young adults were at risk of falling off of SNAP at about 3 million per month. Participation declined in the past year since the signing on July 4th, from July 4th to December, of about 3.3 million people fell off of SNAP. As we move further into the things that are going on, we have the Farm Bill. And I want to say that, one of the things that was really frustrating to me this year was the Agriculture Secretary framed work requirements as both a fiscal and moral matter, that taxpayer-funded aid should encourage work and responsibility, and that requiring 20 hours per week of work or training is a reasonable expectation for adults who can work. And the House Speaker framed refusing to work while able as defrauding the system. We all know, those of us who have worked in advocacy, we know that research has found that work requirements do not increase employment or earnings. Individuals in government that feel like it is a moral obligation to starve people. It's not saying to cut benefits. It's not saying that they have a moral obligation to make sure that taxpayer dollars are spent the right way. It is a moral obligation for them to starve people. And if I'm not mistaken, the last time I checked in the Bible, it did not say that when I was hungry, you gave me work requirements. I want to talk about WIC. And I will say that WIC was a lifeline for my kids and I. All three of my kids were WIC babies. The House voted to cut the fruit and vegetable benefit from WIC, a certain percentage. The amount removed, the produce benefit removed, is $141 million from 5.4 million participants. So the current produce benefit is $26 per child, $48 for pregnant or postpartum women, and $52 for breastfeeding women. And overall, WIC funding is $200 million below the needed funding level of $8.2 billion. And there's an estimate that about 600,000 individuals could be turned away from the WIC program. And the wait list that would be created would go by priority of non-breastfeeding new parents and preschoolers first. We all have children. We all know what it's like to have to feed those children. I want to start with you, Lindsay. Tell me what your experience was with WIC. Tell me how you feel these proposed changes would impact mothers in the near future.
I don't understand if we have a program that is supposed to make America healthy again, that reducing the access to fruits and vegetables aligns with that. It, that's my first thought there, but like, how do you take that away when that is one of the most important components of food and nutrition and health? I just don't know how it makes sense, because we're supposed to be a society that does, if we cherish family and family values and protecting the vulnerable women and children, then why are we torturing them? It's the worry, and that worry or that inability to even follow your doctor's guidance, it really is a life or death thing when you think about it. And it is it may not be immediate death, but it may be a quality of life restriction. It may be a lifespan reduction. We all want our kids to have balanced, healthy, nutritious intake. We all have a responsibility. Should we all really be struggling for like the basic necessities for shelter and food? Shouldn't that be something that there's a lifeline? There's something there already that makes it so that the basic human rights are there, rather than you have to prove that you're good enough by a list of eligibility requirements that changes based upon whoever's elected and their mood swings. I mean, I don't understand that classism and that judgment that we impose, the ranking of value on people. I mean, it really is a maternal lottery. Okay, you're born to this family which has so much wealth, or you're born into this situation, and you have no idea what you're sliding into when you come into this world and what those circumstances will be. And then it's all a numbers game with the way your life could go. There could be, like, I don't know, some tragedy that strikes, and then you're on your own. And now as an adult, I'm on my own. I don't have anybody to turn to except for, like I said earlier, the Buy Nothing community has become my honestly become my savior. These women who I don't even know, who bring groceries to my door if I'm in crisis. And I give back to the group too. It's a giving economy, but like, should we all have to bet on like somebody else's kind heart to look out for us? I don't think so. I think we're all here. One thing that going through a divorce reminded me was that no matter what, we are all worthy of love and happiness and good health. You don't have to prove that. It doesn't matter what your zip code is, what your skin color is, what your language is. Humanity says that you are worthy. No matter what, even what religion, humanity, you're worthy.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you said that because, when you talk about the Buy Nothing group, it reminds me of the village that used to
Yes.
exist when I was a kid. Because if someone had a need, there was a village. And you're right, a giving economy is basically based on someone's kind heart. And when we think about the cuts to something as vital as WIC, it should not be based on someone's kind heart to provide what is already provided for in a program that exists that was created by the Nixon administration to provide for women, infants, and
And
children.
children.
We live in a country where they're complaining that we're not having enough children, but at the same time, you're cutting the vital safety net to ensure that if women do have children, that they can be cared for and they can be healthy. So you're 100% right. Tiffany, one of the things I wanted you to do, can you explain to the folks that are listening that have never used WIC how it works?
What happens is the government gives you a set amount of money for fresh fruits and vegetables, and then aside from that, they give you a specific quantity of things that you can purchase for your household to feed your children. For example, you can get 36 ounces of cereal, but it has to be like whole grain cereals. It can't be something loaded with sugar. Or you can get 1% or fat-free milk, something like that, and you can get like 3 gallons. And so that is often what WIC is, and that in itself is very stressful if you've ever had to shop in a big grocery store for WIC.
And
There
don't
has been
forget about the beans and peanut butter and
Yes.
cheese.
Yes, beans, peanut butter, and cheese. Those are also essential. And yogurt. Yeah, one of my younger daughter's favorites. Yeah, we definitely can't forget about that. And I was just talking about how
Can't forget the juicy juice.
Yeah, the juicy
yeah, the
juice.
juicy juice.
Or the concentrated frozen cans
Yes. Oh, I
of
don't know that they have those
juice.
They don't
anymore.
do
They're
those
not
don't?
included
anymore.
anymore.
Really?
Yeah, they
wasn't
don't
when I
No,
do
was
they
a
those
don't.
kid.
anymore.
That should show you how long it's been since I had WIC.
It was
Yes.
And then, like,
when
I
we were I
love
was a
it
kid.
too with a breastfeeding mom that's exclusively breastfeeding or has a WIC pack. So just to add to that, if it's okay, sis,
Yeah.
Yes,
um,
absolutely. Go ahead.
do you want to know? Like, I know you said how it works because I worked with WIC for almost 4 years. There as a breastfeeding peer counselor and being able to work alongside of the dietitians there. So of course, with being for women, infant, and children. So of course, women that are pregnant, if you get Medicaid or some type of government assistance, you automatically
Hmm.
qualify. You don't have to go
Yeah.
through the income eligibility part um, of it. So I've had people that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are nurses, nurse practitioners, because they were off during that time and like they benefits hadn't kicked in for them to get short-term disability, something like that. So they would be eligible for WIC, whereas they wouldn't be eligible for SNAP or something else. But WIC,
Yes.
they would be able to, on the infant part, to provide formula and things like that. And mom is able to get a postpartum package for 6 months after having the baby. So all through her pregnancy, 6 months after having the baby, she get a postpartum um, package which help nutrition with her, and then those moms that are exclusively breastfeeding, they get a package instead of 6 months, they get it for a year. And
Mm-hmm.
so they can get like tuna on there as well,
Yes.
to help with, staying up with breastfeeding because it takes a lot. You are a factory and you got to, keep up with yourself. And I had even said, we care so much about feeding the babies, but what about feeding the moms?
Yes.
And
Right.
so that's
Yes.
that's really big as well too. No one really checks on the well-being of mom's health. So we like, children, trying to reduce infant mortality, but what about maternal morbidity or, mom's maternal health, things like that. So that all plays a factor into these programs. Children are able to get it until they're 5. All of my children aged out and it was a wonderful program to be on. I really enjoy WIC, and it did make you feel
Right.
less than getting WIC as well because so many people are able to get it because it has a higher income threshold than any other program. I appreciated WIC. Now the things that did have like its downturns to it was like before they put the labels in the store and you could do it the mobile way to scan and see what was eligible when you got up to check out, depending on who the cashier or the clerk was. They will call you out and like, this is not WIC eligible. Like you can't get this or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you do not have to call me out. Jeez.
Yes.
So stuff like that. But other than that, I like how they have it
Yes.
labeled now. You can scan it, because it's electronic, um, and know what you can get. So when you're going into the store, it's not like an embarrassment if you are that family that's ashamed or don't want nobody to see what you got going on. You can save yourself the embarrassment.
To
But
add to what
it's
Candace was, go ahead, Candace. Sorry.
you okay, and I'm about to say it really ain't nothing to be ashamed of because you eating and they ain't taking care of nothing that's going on in your house, honey. So mind your business. Unless you want to pay for all this over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say to add to what Candace is saying, again, babies and children, they do have to go see a nutritionist at the WIC office. And so that is part of being on WIC. And so they have the opportunity to see if babies are developing properly, if kids are getting enough nutrition, and they advise you on nutrition based on your child's medical status. So that's an added bonus in addition to being able to go pick up a lot of these things from the store. Also, I would just like to say several good points have been made. Supporting a mother really is not separate from supporting her child. In many homes, the mom is the infrastructure holding everything together. What I struggle with when it comes to this WIC conversation and when it comes to this SNAP conversation is, as Yolanda pointed out, we are having national conversations about falling birth rates and encouraging Americans to have more children, and the government has even acknowledged that, fertility is at a historic low, and they've talked about helping families. But having a baby really is only the beginning. That child has to be fed, housed, cared for, and raised. So if we genuinely are concerned about declining birth rates, we have to make an environment that is good so that women are comfortable with bringing more children into this world. I mean, we cannot encourage women to have more babies while simultaneously making pregnancy, breastfeeding, and raising children harder financially. Um, we encourage mothers also to breastfeed because of the benefits to the baby, but breastfeeding requires something from the mother's body. I mean, she has to be nourished too. We can't celebrate the birth of a child, encourage breastfeeding, and then become hesitant to invest in the nutrition of women and children once they leave the hospital, because motherhood does not come in one form. It comes in many forms. There's married mothers, single mothers, foster mothers, adoptive mothers, grandmothers, even other relatives raising children. And so again, there has to be a whole conversation on supporting mothers and making sure mothers are well fed when we want to talk about having babies and having healthy babies. We cannot ask women to have more children and then treat feeding them as if it's a private problem once they're born.
Agree with you 100%. And my kids are adults. They're all in their 20s. My youngest was born in 2005. And I remember vividly having to go back to work 2 weeks after I had him because I couldn't afford not to be at work. Same with my son. My second child, I had to go back to work with him after 4 weeks because I couldn't afford to be off from work. And I still qualified for SNAP and I still qualified for WIC because financially there was not enough there. And I don't think, and I will say, as a woman, and it's research that I've done, I don't think that most Americans think about how far behind women fall in gaining wealth, retirement savings, and all of the benchmarks that we're told we're supposed to hit, even if we are married, because we are caregivers for our children. And there is little safety net there to help support us in not being the primary caregiver. So, you guys are 100% correct across the board. So I'm going to close this out with a few thoughts of my own. And typically I don't plan on being the person behind the microphone, but I will say that I grew up in the Baptist church. And one of the things that I was taught is that we take care of our neighbors. We are our brother's keeper. When I hear politicians who espouse that they are Christians, they have a belief, but at the same time, they are okay with starving children, starving mothers, saying to a veteran, yes, you served your country, but you don't have a waiver while you're struggling through PTSD and you don't qualify for disability. You have to get out there with everyone else for 20 hours a week. There's no longer a waiver for folks who are homeless to receive SNAP benefits without these work requirements. There's real harm being done in our country. And to some extent, I don't recognize our country anymore when it comes to taking care of its citizens. We are a country that we talk about when other countries aren't taking care of their citizens, but what about our country? And it starts with women, because women are the first educators of children. In closing, I just wanted to add that and say that thank you to the three of you for being willing to have this conversation. Because if we don't have these conversations, no one will have this conversation. And the stigma and the myths and everything that exists out in the world will continue to exist without us being a part of that conversation. So without further ado, I've truly enjoyed this time with you all, and we'll see each other again soon. Good night, y'all.
Powered by Riverside.